And so, again, we would welcome any volunteers. But with that, Catherine, perhaps, I guess I'll just take it till we get to the discussion of the principles. So as a reminder, each year we develop a budget that includes the CIP, the Capital Improvement Program, our own work plan and operating budget associated with that, the support we provide to support staff at the city who are employees of the city but work specifically on DMC projects. And then there is a annual working capital loan process, knowing that we don't really hold any funds in reserve. We only operate as a conduit, as you heard from Craig earlier. I think I will. I guess I'll say that we do this process commencing now in May. Do it alongside city staff and city council. Come back to the board in September for consideration, and then from there to the city council, which ultimately must also approve our budget. We use this pyramid to kind of shape how we develop our budget. I won't go through all of this detail, but what wanted to spend a little time on, Madam Chair, members of the board, is the way in which we have thought about prioritization of capital improvement projects, and are presenting to you a new framework to think about and for us to use as we evaluate capital improvement projects, and there are many, and we can't do them all at one time. And so with that, we're presenting, and with the DMC EDA board support, kind of a new way of positioning and talking about evaluating projects. So on the left is the current set of principles, which have served as well, but perhaps maybe a bit more bureaucratic and less aspirational, which you'll see more on the right side. Looking for feedback or comment about that.
Member Norton. Yeah, I'm going to be picky about this. Sorry, Patrick. As someone who carried this legislation and heard daily about the priorities that we have as an organization, when we talk about drifting, I think sometimes we drift away from the pillars that sold this project at the Capitol, and the reason that the city of Rochester got the funding. And I want to be respectful, knowing that times change and things change, but I also want us to be focused on why we got the funding and what we said we would do that funding, and not drift too far away. So while I appreciate everything on the right side, I think we need to be reminded periodically about what the legislation said and what we agreed was the focus, so that we don't try making DMC the be-all end-all source to fund to fix, repair, and fund all of the issues of our community, because that's not what its focus was. So I'm just going to ask that we please keep the development plan and not just current priorities, but the purpose of DMC, those pillars, the reason this is here, in front of us.
Other comments? Well, thank you, Patrick and Catherine. I would add to, I think, those very valid comments from the mayor and former legislator in the room. I think that's very important. I think it's the thing that resonates with me on the right side of the page is it's easily understandable for people who aren't in this room. It's easily understandable for potential partners, for community members. Who are we? What are we trying to do? So I love the idea of trying to use very accessible language, non-bureaucratic language, to communicate what we do to a very broad and diverse audience, while we make sure that we are intent on achieving the intentions set out in state legislation. The one thing that I would just add as a comment, not something that I think needs to be addressed right now, one of the most interesting tensions for me is what do we have before us today? What are we doing today? What are our opportunities for investment today? And what's the trade-off then about what we can't do 3 years from now, 5 years from now? So finding a way for this board to help staff bring that forward and help us understand as we're making a decision what the inherent trade-off is about what we can't do in the future. That element of time and opportunity, I think, is something that we need to consider more fully and see if there's a way that we can give you some feedback or help us with that decision-making characteristic. So I like this, and I think that the member Norton's comments are very important as well as we consider language that we use. Any additional comment from you, Patrick or Kathy?
Not for me, but I do see.
I want to say, I really appreciate that comment. And I think this board is the one to do that. And I think our discussions and our consideration of what you just said about long range vision, what decisions we make today and how does that impact is super important. And I think it's important then for that information to be transferred back to the city council, who often is working in the moment, where decisions have to be made from day to day. And if we're gonna be more visionary and say we're doing this, we're not doing this today because of what we want to do in 3 to 5 years, and share that with the city council as we go, I think it would be very, very helpful.
Fantastic. Additional comments? All right, so I'm going to suggest, Patrick, perhaps you and I can follow up on the 2 to 3 members on the budget work group, but
Great,
that's an
thank you.
example of that time dynamic, and we look forward to this discussion then when we see a proposed capital plan in September.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Patrick, I'm going to turn it back to you again.
Well, thank you, and